Forget everything Hollywood taught you about the Banshee's cinematic scream. What if this legendary spirit wasn't a supernatural curse? What if she was a visceral manifestation of real Irish trauma? We are stripping away the folklore to reveal a logical response to centuries of mass mortality. Welcome to the Conjuring Files, where we open the vaults of history to separate myth from truth. In this new file, we confront horror's most misunderstood spirits, strip away the wailing ghost in white robes, and what remains isn't a monster. It's a woman, a professional mourner hired to grieve for the dead. In films, she is a jump-scare omen, but in Ireland, she was the caointe, the keening woman. Her voice wasn't a curse, it was a sacred ritual. It was a raw, rhythmic lament that echoed through valleys, announcing loss to the world, a sound that bridged the gap between the living and the departed. Keening was a complex art. It involved improvised poetry, repetitive chanting, and a specific vocal vibration meant to induce a trance-like state of shared sorrow. These women were essential. When a community was too numb to cry after years of famine or war, the keener gave them permission to feel. She carried the weight. Her presence wasn't random. She was tied to 5 noble Gaelic families. To hear her cry wasn't doom. It was a final, profound honor. The O'Neills, the kings of Ulster, were said to be watched over by the most powerful of spirits. Her wail was the land itself acknowledging their departure. It meant your lineage mattered. It meant the blood in your veins was recognized by the ancient spirits of Ira. You were never forgotten. Folklore tells of her brushing her long, wild hair with a silver comb. To find this comb was a dangerous omen, a direct link to the woman of the mounds. Sometimes she appeared as the Bean Nige, the washer at the ford, cleaning the blood-stained linens of those destined to die in battle. Her eyes were often described as red, not from malice, but from centuries of continuous weeping for the lost sons and daughters of Ireland. But then came the Great Famine. Death became so frequent, so overwhelming, that the ritual of keening began to break. The silence grew louder. The church also sought to silence the keener. They viewed the raw, pagan-rooted emotionality of the ritual as undignified and unchristian. As the ritual faded from the hills, it was reborn in the flickering light of cinema. But the soul of the caointe was left behind. Hollywood gave us a ghost, a jump-scare monster designed to entertain. They turned her grief into a gimmick and her sorrow into a scream. In the process, we lost the meaning. We stopped seeing the woman and started fearing the phantom. But the real horror isn't the scream. It's the silence that came after. When death grew so vast, even the Banshee had no voice left to fill the void of a broken nation. Ireland gave us grief. And grief, in its purest form, sounds like a woman who refuses to let the dead be forgotten. She is the memory of the land. Next, we travel to the ancient tombs where her echo first began, and explore the dark reason why she followed bloodlines across the ocean.
She follows our blood.
Long before Christianity, Ireland's dead were buried in passage tombs like Newgrange, aligned with solstices, carved with spirals, built to honor ancestors. The Tuatha Dé Danann, Ireland's mythical first people, were said to retreat into these mounds when invaders came, becoming the Aos, the fairy folk. Among them was the Banshee, not a demon, but a guardian spirit of noble clans. She didn't cause death. She witnessed it. And her cry was a bridge between worlds, a signal that a soul had crossed and the living must now remember. Historical records show the Banshee was never feared by her families. Children were told, "If you hear her, light a candle. She's come for someone who mattered." Her appearance varied. Sometimes a young woman in white, sometimes an old crone washing blood-stained clothes at a riverbank, a vision called the Bean Knee. But this reverence existed only in Gaelic Ireland. When English colonizers arrived, they saw keening as barbaric. Laws were passed banning public mourning. The Banshee, once a symbol of nobility, was recast as a superstitious omen, proof of Irish savagery. Yet the spirit persisted, because in a land where sons were hanged, daughters starved, and names erased, someone had to bear witness. And the Banshee did, not with malice, with memory. Because when your culture is under siege, even grief becomes resistance. Next, how her cry evolved from ritual to survival, and why it grew more frantic with every wave of violence. She was uniquely tied to the 5 great families of Ireland: the O'Neills, O'Briens, O'Connors, O'Gradys, and Kavanaghs. To have a Banshee was a mark of ancient noble lineage, a status the colonizers sought to dismantle. Legends spoke of her silver comb. To find it was a sign of her presence. To steal it was to invite her wrath. As the Bean Knee, she was seen at the water's edge, pre-washing the shrouds of those about to fall in battle. During the penal laws, when faith and culture were practiced in secret, the Banshee's wail became a shared secret. Though the public caoine was banned, the spirit's voice could not be silenced by any earthly decree. As the centuries wore on and the losses grew, the sightings of the woman in white became more frequent. In the dark years of the Great Famine, it was said her cry never ceased, echoing from one end of the island to the other. The wail grew more frantic, shifting from a mournful lament to a scream of absolute agonizing desperation. Some say she even followed the coffin ships across the Atlantic, her voice heard in the rigging during the storm. In the crowded tenements of Dublin and New York, her cry was a reminder of the home they were forced to leave. Victorian folklorists further twisted her image, turning a noble ancestor into a mere ghost story monster. By stripping her of her clan ties, they stripped the Irish people of their spiritual connection to the land. During the revolutions of the 20th century, her cry was heard once more, mourning the young men who fell for freedom. To hear the Banshee was to know that despite every attempt at erasure, the Irish soul remained. In the modern world, she has been borrowed by cinema and games, often losing her original profound meaning. But these pop culture shadows are not the true spirit. They are but echoes of the colonizers' recasting. The true Banshee remains what she always was: a guardian, a witness, and a bridge. For those who still listen to the wind across the burn, she is the heartbeat of a culture that refused to die. She is a witness that spans millennia, connecting the Neolithic past to the present struggle for identity. Her wail reminds us that grief is not just an end, but a powerful act of remembering. She continues her eternal vigil, ensuring that no soul passes without being acknowledged and no story is forgotten. In every cry heard in the gale, we hear the voice of a people who turned even their sorrows into a form of resistance. Memory is the ultimate resistance, and the Banshee's wail is its eternal soundtrack. The Banshee, a guardian of memory and resistance. The caoine, the traditional Irish caoine, wasn't random wailing. It was structured poetry. Three parts: the salutation, "O my son," the narrative, and the farewell, "Go now to your rest." Women improvised verses, weaving personal sorrow with social critique. They took your land, then your life. What justice is this? Keening wasn't just emotional release, it was public testimony. In a society where women had no legal voice, the caoine was their platform, and the Banshee, she was its eternal echo. As English plantations seized Irish land, as penal laws banned Catholic rites, as families were evicted en masse, the Banshee's cry grew more frequent. Not because death increased, though it did, but because proper burial vanished. Catholics were denied churchyards. Bodies were dumped in mass pits. Grief had no outlet, so the Banshee filled the void. Her scream wasn't prophecy, it was protest, a sonic monument to those denied dignity in death. One 17th-century English observer wrote, "Their women howl like beasts, but it chills the blood, for you know they mourn not just one, but all." Because the Banshee wasn't haunting houses. She was haunting history, and her cry was the sound of a nation refusing to forget. Next, the Great Famine and the day the Banshee fell silent. In the 1840s, death came not in ones or tens, but in millions. The Great Famine killed over 1 million Irish. Another 2 million fled. Villages emptied overnight, leaving only the sound of the wind. Coffins were reused, bodies stacked like firewood. There was no time to keen, no strength to mourn. And so the Banshee stopped screaming. Historians call this the Silent Era. Diaries from the time describe an eerie quiet over the countryside. No laments, no prayers. Just the wind through abandoned cottages. The Banshee, once a personal spirit for noble families, became a universal symbol of collapse. She wasn't just mourning individuals, she was mourning Ireland itself. Some say she vanished because there were too many dead to name. Others claim she still walks, but her voice is gone, replaced by the hollow moan of empty hearths. One survivor wrote, "We heard no banshee during the hunger, only silence, and that was worse." Because when grief becomes too vast, even spirits break. The Banshee didn't die. She was drowned in sorrow, and the land has been quiet ever since. Next, how her legacy crossed oceans, and why she's returning in 2026.
Let it rise.
Today, the Banshee lives, not in Ireland, but in the Irish diaspora, in Boston, Chicago, Sydney. Descendants light candles on All Souls' Day, whispering names their grandparents forgot. The Banshee became a symbol of cultural displacement, the ghost of a home they never knew, but still mourn. And in 2026, something remarkable is happening. Irish artists, therapists, and historians are reviving the caoine, not as superstition, but as trauma healing. Workshops teach keening as a way to process intergenerational grief. Musicians sample archival recordings of last-generation keeners. Even psychologists use it in grief therapy. Because the Banshee was never about fear. She was about memory, about refusing to let the dead vanish into silence. So the next time you hear a wail in the wind, don't think of horror movies. Think of a woman in 1847, too exhausted to cry for her fifth child. Think of a daughter in 2026, finally speaking her great-grandmother's name aloud. Think of the land itself, still waiting to be heard. The Banshee wasn't a curse. She was a witness. Hollywood gave her a scream. Ireland gave her a name. She didn't predict death. She refused to let it be forgotten. Like if you've ever felt grief too deep for words. Subscribe for more. Share with someone who knows.